Do you have a successful business, but you still don't feel as cool as you used to be back in the day? Well, if you want to feel young again, ignore that young secretary and get yourself a cheap used C6 Corvette. That's right. I may not have New Balance sneakers, but I got this 2013 Corvette Grand Sport. Now, all joking aside, I love these cars. This generation of Corvettes, I think, is one of the best ones ever made. Kind of classic, still a little bit raw, still pretty fun to drive, and not that expensive now that they're 20 years old. This particular example behind me doesn't have as high mileage as we usually do for a high miles review, but they've been out so long that we really do have a good feel for the common problems and things we need to look out for, and if, well, they're reliable. Today, we're going to take a walk around the outside. We're going to talk about those common problems, and then ultimately we are going to decide if the C6 Grand Sport is a buy or a bust. Starting up front on our C6 Corvette here. Now, this is going to be one of the first cars I don't really have to talk about rust on them because there's not any rust issues on these cars. However, they do have a variety of cosmetic issues. You're going to notice stuff, especially now as they're getting up in age, higher miles, if they were kept outside. The paint, especially the clear on them, wasn't the best quality in the world. And even this one that was kept mostly indoors still has some paint spots that are really tough to photograph, but you can tell that the clear is starting to show its age a little bit. Sometimes you'll notice some door gaps, things like that. Up front is actually probably the most controversial or most area with most problems up here, and that's because these front bumpers will sag. You can even see it on this one as I walk up here. These guys will pop up on both sides and the front will kind of sag away from the headlights. Now this can be remedied and fixed, but it is a super common problem. The other is just paint chips. These cars are famous for just getting absolutely destroyed basically in the front end. You can even see some of the paint chips on the front of this one. Headlights will oxidize and look pretty rough over time if these cars were kept outside at all. So that's something that you got to keep clean or get some new headlights for. Overall though, for now being 14 years old for this example, still a pretty darn good looking car, and I think they've aged really well. Under the hood of our C6 Grand Sport here, we got the 6.2 liter LS3 V8 that makes 430 horsepower, 424 pound-feet of torque. Now from the factory, if you got the dual mode exhaust option, which I do not believe this car had, but if you got that, then you got bumped up to 436 horsepower. Now, if you notice during the startup there that this exhaust was a little bit louder, this does not have the dual mode exhaust, but it does have an aftermarket exhaust made by Hooker. I would also steer clear of those if you're having a midlife crisis. Now, right off the bat, I want to tell you guys that these engines are extremely reliable. One of the best small block engines that GM ever made. And for 50 years, until some of the more recent years, GM by far made the best small block engines out there. And these were some of the best that they made. Not a ton of large mechanical issues with these. The ones that do have issues are generally due to being abused, track wear, prolonged oil changes, or lack of maintenance, something like that. But in its stock form, is pretty darn reliable. This car has had the harmonic balancer replaced. They delaminate in there, and that is a sort of a heck of a job, unfortunately. But it's not part of the main part of the engine, but that is something you're going to see pretty often. If I was looking at a used one, I would absolutely look down there on the front of the engine and make sure that that is not wobbling it at all, because it is a very common problem on these cars. There can be, as these cars age, some valve train noise, valve springs, things like that that show wear, but generally that is on cars that have been driven very hard. But that's a real concern because these are a sports car and they are going to get driven hard, and some people are going to take them to the track and abuse them. Other things as these cars age that I think you will find now at this point is just oil leaks, rear main seal leaks, things like that. Got to keep checking oil, make sure that there's not any puddles underneath of them, anything like that, because gaskets are going to be drying up, and I've seen that several times. This particular car, no leaks yet, thankfully, but I suspect as it ages, there will be some oil leaks underneath here. One other thing that was fixed on this car that isn't directly related to the engine, but is just something I feel like I should mention, is the fuel tank. We noticed the car smelled like gas. It was sitting in the garage and just real nasty smell, and it's because there is a recall for the fuel tank. One of the connections on there leaks, but that can be replaced at GM under their extended warranty. So real easy process. They did it for free. And while we're talking about leaks on the engine, the other one is water pump. The water pump on these can fail, usually around 125,000 miles, something like that. Not a huge deal. It does take a little bit of time to take care of, but not a big concern. It doesn't fail more than most other manufacturers out there. And the last thing on the engine before we move on to the transmission is sometimes the coil packs, as these age, will go bad as well. Kind of, again, typical routine maintenance stuff, and they're not overly expensive on these cars. Luckily, you're still dealing with some GM parts, so you're not gonna have like crazy expense on most parts for these. So, but replace all 8 of them and you should be good to go for a long time. Now moving on to the 6-speed manual transmission. Now, if you're looking at a manual on one of these cars, the biggest concern is going to be the clutch. And all of the powertrain is just going to be clutch wear. Now, if you're looking at one with 150,000 miles on it, you're probably on a second or third clutch at that point, depending how hard or how well it was driven. But I would absolutely take them out on a good long test drive and make sure that it shifts through all the gears. There can be some synchro issues, especially between second and third gear on these cars. Make sure it goes through, no grinding, goes into gear solidly, and that the clutch feels like it's grabbing well. Now moving on to the interior of our C6 Corvette. They did make some changes throughout this generation of Corvettes, but they were all very small. They put some stitched leather around the center console. They changed the bolstering in the seats slightly. And added a stitch dash if you go up to some of the higher trim option ones. This car doesn't have it. Overall, though, they're very similar throughout the whole generation from 2005 to 2013. And these interiors are vastly improved over the prior generation of Corvettes, the C5. The C5 had a lot of problems, but that does not mean that these interiors are particularly good. In fact, they're pretty subpar when it comes to wear and tear. These things will creak, rattle. The seats, even in this one, are all dried out. The leather is. The foam will also wear out. These plastic handles feel like they are from a Toys R Us toy bin and not like a Hot Wheels. Like this is like some Dollar General stuff, actually. That's probably better. The leather on the steering wheel has shrunk around the airbag. And yeah, the top will rattle pretty gnarly if you go over any serious bumps or anything like that. That being said, for actual like a road trip, something like that, it's decently comfortable. There's not ergonomically, it's okay, things like that, but actual wear and tear and just general fit and finish are pretty rough on these cars. Now, as far as electronics, we do have some issues, nothing too crazy. The biggest culprit of electrical issues on these cars is a low battery or a failing battery. These cars are very sensitive to needing a full charged, good battery. I would plan to replace your battery about every 2 years, because if you notice just some random electrical quirks, lights on the dash, things like that, most of the time it is the battery. Now, as far as other problems, you can have some issues, especially with HVAC stuff. Even this car has a little bit of noise from the fan, sometimes blend doors, which that's common on any car, but I think they're a little bit more common on these cars for things to not switch between hot and cold, stuff like that. Not the end of the world, but it is a little bit of a process to fix those problems. As far as other switches and things, anything can fail on them, but kind of just at typical rates. There's nothing too crazy like that. The little sensors for the doors will sometimes go bad for your keyless entry. Small stuff like that, none of it's terribly expensive. Overall, even though I hated on the interior pretty hard at the beginning for how it kind of creaks and rattles, which is really annoying, I actually don't hate this interior on a day-to-day. It's fairly comfortable. You can road trip, you're fine. But it's just not the most luxurious or refined experience. Now, you always got to mention the trunk when you're talking about a Corvette, because they pride themselves on being able to put a large amount of things, especially golf clubs, in the trunk of a Corvette. And you can easily do that. There's a ton of space back here, even with the rear glass. Yes, you got to watch the height a little bit, but there is a ton of space back here. It does fly kind of everywhere if you're actually going to accelerate or anything like that, which isn't great. Now, if you do take the top off, it also has mounting points back here, and then you pretty much lose most of your space. But in this form right now, you can take just about anything you could ever want along with you for two people. Pulling out on the road in our C6 Grand Sport. Now, I told you guys right off the bat that I love these cars, and I've been around them for a while, and we've had this car now for several years, so have had a pretty good experience as far as reliability and things like that. Told you about a couple of the problems that we had, you know, over the few years here. And the biggest one probably to look forward in the future is suspension, where we are on a very bumpy road. This car has been gone over. We did have to do some ball joints, things like that, that just had tie rod end that had a little bit of wear. And you're gonna have that especially between 75 and 100,000 miles for sure. If the car's been tracked, it's gonna have even more, driven hard. So luckily, same as kind of the engine parts, none of that stuff is very expensive. Now we will get on in here in a little bit, but we got to get up to some dry road. It just rained here this morning, so we're gonna go out where the sun has hit the road a little bit here in a second. But let's talk about fuel economy while we are at it here. These are rated at 16 and 26. They varied throughout the C6 years a little bit on fuel economy because they had a couple different engines, but that's generally going to be pretty close to whatever you're going to find. Now, the real world experiences out on the highway, you're going to do better than that. Even in this car, if I'm out on the highway at 65 miles an hour, 70, something like that, at least the gauge on here will be telling me somewhere around 28, 29 miles to the gallon. So you're not really going to pay any sports car premium for your fuel mileage and having, you know, poor fuel mileage. So that is one of the best things about these cars. Now, a couple of other things that I think you should look out for is ABS sensors, wheel speed sensors, things like that. Wheel bearings, those will also go bad. Axle wear, as you get up into those higher mileages, is pretty common if you notice a little vibration. The other is, one of the crazy things we had on this car, but is fairly common on these, is the brake rotors from factory had some faults and they would actually crack, and this car had it. We had to replace the brake rotor because it had a hairline crack in it, and that I found is actually to be pretty common. We're on some dry road here, let's get on it. Yeah, it's a Corvette, man. What do you want me to say? Great power, great acceleration, so much fun. No, it's not in this form. I mean, this isn't a Z06 or anything like that, so you're kind of dealing with the standard engine. It's not crazy fast, but it is so much fun to drive. We actually have some corners coming up here. We're going to get on it around those a little bit. Sticks to the road like crazy. This does have heads-up display. Those systems will sometimes be faulty as well, as far as electronic stuff to look out for. Overall, the truth is, even though they have some quirks and some definitely some poor quality pieces here and there for sure, this car is a blast to drive. You get a ton of car for the money. Will still beat most modern cars. Don't try to race a Tesla. I mean, they just don't do that, but don't do that in any car hardly. You can take the roof off, which gives you basically a convertible, and I think it's actually better than the convertibles, and I like the convertibles too, but I think that the removable top is the way to go. Well, obviously you're not taking the whole family along with you. If you're a single person, if you're someone who just drives by themselves all the time and does a lot of highways or anything like that that's not too crazy, I think these cars are absolutely a great option and way more fun than buying a new Toyota Camry. And honestly, reliability-wise, they're not that far off. Back from the test drive, and now it's time to decide if the C6 Corvette Grand Sport is a buy or a bust. The test drive went well. No, these don't drive quite like a brand new sports car, C8 Corvette, any of the newer stuff out there. You can tell that these are a couple generations old now for sure. That being said, they've actually held their value pretty well on these cars. Yes, C6 in general have become some of the cheapest Corvettes out there. C5 and C6s, a lot of the other ones are now going up in price. With 150,000 miles for a C6 Grand Sport, you're probably looking at spending somewhere in the mid $20,000 range. That is high miles for these cars for sure, so you might be able to find one cheaper, but condition on these cars is pretty much everything. That being said, if one's made it to 150,000 miles and is still running pretty well, I think you are going to get up to 250, 300,000 miles without too many issues. Yes, you're going to have some Corvette quirks, I would call them, along the way for sure. You're going to have a rattly interior. You're going to have sagging front bumpers and just general wear and tear of, you know, mid 2000s type of Chevy quality. All of that to say that while there is some things to look out for, these cars are absolutely a buy. There's really not any more reliable sports car out there than a C6 Corvette. Small block Chevy, reliable manual transmission. What else really could you ask for out there? You're going to have to be okay with putting a little bit of maintenance into these cars, just like most at high mileage. If you have one of these and have had a terrible experience, I would be surprised to hear it, but if you have, I want to hear all about it. If there's something I missed, something you think that we should add down in the comments, please put it down below. I want to read all about it. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.
I don't ever slow up, no I don't take sh**. I got no love for the fakeness. If you wanna play tough and wanna hate this, I'll always show up. I don't ever slow up, no I don't take sh**. I got no